All right, listen up. Because if you're here, you're not just surviving narcissists, you're ready to crush them. Now, let's be real. Dealing with a narcissist can feel like getting caught in a never-ending storm. They twist your words, gaslight your reality, and make you doubt yourself until you don't even recognize who you are anymore. Sound familiar? Yeah. But guess what? That storm can end. You can win today. I'm going to walk you through 5 crystal clear signs that you have officially unapologetically defeated the narcissist in your life. And it's not about revenge. It's not about playing their game. It's about something so much bigger, taking your power back. So if you're ready to stop second guessing, start owning your life, and finally recognize how freaking strong you are, let's get into it. There's a moment, a shift, when you realize you're no longer waiting for the narcissist to clap for you, to validate you, or to finally see your worth. You stop bending yourself into 1,000 different versions just to earn a scrap of approval. Because here's the truth. Narcissists survive by making you believe you need their validation to feel good about yourself. They create a system where your self-esteem is tied to their mood, their opinion, and their impossible standards. And for a long time, you might buy into it. You chase their compliments. You hope they'll notice when you do better, try harder, stay quieter. But when you've truly defeated a narcissist, that game ends. You stop playing altogether. You realize that their approval was always a moving target, designed to keep you stuck, exhausted, and doubting yourself. You realize it's not that you weren't good enough. It's that they were never going to give you what you deserved in the first place. And that realization, it's powerful. It's freeing because once you stop seeking their approval, you turn that energy inward. You start validating yourself. You acknowledge your own strength. You stop asking, am I enough for them? And start asking, are they enough for me? Spoiler alert, they're not. When you no longer need their permission to feel confident, to feel lovable, to feel proud of yourself, you become unstoppable. You start trusting your gut again. You listen to your own voice instead of the endless noise they tried to drill into your mind. You make decisions based on your values, not their manipulations. And even when they try to bait you, even when they throw their classic guilt trips or silent treatments or backhanded compliments, you don't take the bait. You see it for what it is, a desperate attempt to pull you back into their control. But you're out. You're free. It's like flipping a switch. The power they used to have over you, the way they could crush you with a glance or lift you up with a few kind words, it's gone. They lose their hold. Because you finally understand that your value doesn't come from how they see you. Your value comes from how you see yourself. You become your own source of validation, and that is something no narcissist can ever touch again. They can throw their tantrums, they can play their mind games, but you're busy living your life, loving yourself, and moving forward without them. There comes a moment when their old tricks just don't work on you anymore. The lies, the guilt trips, the passive-aggressive digs. You see right through all of it like it's a bad magic show you've already watched too many times. In the past, they could spin a simple conversation into a confusing, emotional roller coaster. They could gaslight you until you questioned your own memory, your own sanity. They could twist your words until you were the villain, and somehow they were the victim. But when you've truly defeated a narcissist, something shifts inside you. You don't get hooked anymore. You don't take the bait. You recognize manipulation as soon as it shows up. You don't waste time second-guessing your instincts or trying to decode the hidden meaning behind their words. You see the patterns clearly now. The love bombing, the silent treatment, the rage masked as honest feedback. And instead of reacting, you remain calm. You stop defending yourself against ridiculous accusations. You stop explaining yourself in circles, desperate for them to understand your heart. Because deep down, you know they don't want to understand. They want control. And you're done giving it to them. When their tactics fall flat, it's not because they've changed. It's because you have. You're no longer that vulnerable, confused version of yourself who thought that if you just explained better, loved harder, or stayed quieter, they'd treat you right. You now understand that their manipulation isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their emptiness. They have to distort reality to feel powerful, but you're not playing anymore. You're rooted in your truth, grounded in your own reality, and that drives them crazy. Because a narcissist loses all their power the moment you stop responding the way they expect. You stop arguing with them over things you know are true. You stop wasting your breath trying to convince them of obvious facts. You stop taking their projections personally. When they try to trigger you, you stay composed. Not because you're bottling up your emotions, but because you finally understand they're not worth your energy. You realize you don't owe them anything. Not your explanations, not your justifications, not even your anger. Their chaos used to control your mind. Now, their chaos is just noise. Background static that you barely even notice. And here's the wild part. When their manipulation no longer affects you, it exposes just how weak and predictable they really are. You see how desperate they are to provoke a reaction. You see the fear behind their rage. You see the insecurity behind their arrogance. And instead of feeling small like you used to, you feel stronger because you realize that real power isn't loud. It's quiet. Real power is the ability to stay grounded in who you are while the narcissist flails, spins, and throws tantrums trying to get a rise out of you. But you don't rise, you stand. At some point, the emotional cord snaps, and you realize you don't owe them anything. Not your guilt, not your explanations, not your heart. When you've defeated a narcissist, you are no longer chained to the emotional roller coaster they built for you. You don't feel responsible for their moods, their failures, or their unhappiness anymore. In the past, they trained you to believe that everything was your fault. If they were upset, you must have caused it. If they lashed out, you must have provoked it. You were carrying the weight of their dysfunction like it was your personal job to fix them. But the moment you cut that cord, you stop living under the crushing pressure of their emotional chaos. You stop second-guessing your choices just because they disapprove. You stop replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you should have said something differently to avoid their anger. You stop feeling guilty for prioritizing yourself, because now you understand. They engineered your guilt. They fed it, watered it, and used it to control you. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. You realize that their emotions are their responsibility, not yours. You realize that being a good, empathetic, loving person doesn't mean being a doormat for someone else's dysfunction. When the emotional cord is cut, you don't react to their guilt trips anymore. You don't panic when they give you the cold shoulder or try to punish you with silence. Instead, you sit with the discomfort and you remind yourself, I am not responsible for managing their feelings. And that is powerful beyond words. You start making decisions based on what's healthy for you, not on what might temporarily soothe their ego. You start choosing yourself without needing their permission. You no longer need to explain or justify why you're putting up boundaries. You just do it calmly, clearly, and unapologetically. And what's even more liberating is that you no longer crave their understanding or forgiveness. You don't need them to agree that you were right to leave, to say no, to move on. You don't need closure from them because you gave closure to yourself. The emotional cord that once kept you tied to their moods and their manipulations is gone, and in its place is a quiet, unshakable peace. A peace that says, I am enough, I always was. A peace that no tantrum, no gaslighting, no fake apology can touch. When you've cut the emotional cord, you can finally breathe again. You can finally hear your own voice above the noise. You can finally trust yourself without needing their approval, to validate your choices. And that's the ultimate freedom, not just surviving them, but thriving beyond them. You don't just move on, you rise, you rebuild, and you do it without dragging the heavy chains of guilt and obligation behind you. You step into a life where you owe nothing to the person who once made you believe you owed them everything. Boundaries aren't just things you talk about anymore. They're things you actually enforce. When you've truly defeated a narcissist, you don't just set boundaries in theory. You make them real, and you make them non-negotiable. In the past, you might have drawn a line and watched it get erased the moment they pushed back. You might have said, I won't tolerate being spoken to that way. But when the yelling started, you found yourself shrinking, apologizing, giving second and third and fourth chances, because back then, their approval, their moods, their love bombing cycles kept you stuck in an endless loop of forgiving what should have been unforgivable, but not anymore. Now, your boundaries aren't about trying to change them. They're about protecting you. You stop trying. You teach them how to respect you. You stop hoping that if you're just patient enough or clear enough or kind enough, they'll finally get it. You understand that narcissists don't respect boundaries because they see other people as extensions of themselves. They think your time, your energy, your emotions are theirs to manipulate, and you're just done playing along with that script. So you draw your line in the sand, and when they test it, because they will, you don't explain. You don't argue, you don't beg for understanding, you enforce. You say no and you mean it. You walk away when they cross a line. You end the conversation when it turns abusive. You hang up the phone, you block the number, you remove access. You don't just tell them your boundaries, you show them through action. You become someone who backs up their words with behavior every single time. And here's the thing, when you start enforcing your boundaries, you will trigger them. They will accuse you of being selfish, cold, dramatic. They'll call you the bad guy. They'll try to guilt you into stepping back into your old patterns. But you know better now. Their anger, their tantrums, their accusations, they're just proof that your boundaries are working. Every time they lash out because you said no, it's confirmation that you're doing exactly what you need to do to protect your peace. When you enforce your boundaries, you're not being mean, you're not being petty, you're not trying to hurt them. You're simply recognizing that self-respect is not up for negotiation. You're no longer waiting for them to treat you better. You're treating yourself better by refusing to allow their behavior into your life. And every time you choose yourself over their chaos, you get stronger. You build trust with yourself. You start to feel that solid, unshakable foundation under your feet, the one that says, I don't have to tolerate disrespect to prove I'm a good person. Setting boundaries is powerful, but enforcing them is transformational. It shifts the balance of power completely. It says, without apology, you don't get access to me just because you demand it. You don't get to hurt me just because you want to. I decide who is close to me. I decide what is allowed in my life. And when you live that truth, you are no longer surviving the narcissist, you are rising beyond them. There's a quiet revolution that happens when you finally start choosing your peace over their approval. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, decision by decision, moment by moment, until suddenly you realize you're living differently. You're no longer obsessing over how to keep them happy. You're no longer walking on eggshells or trying to preempt their next explosion. You're no longer living in reaction to their moods. Instead, you are prioritizing your own mental clarity, your own emotional safety, your own well-being. And you don't feel guilty about it. At first, it might feel strange. You've been trained to believe that keeping the narcissist calm and satisfied was your responsibility, your role, your burden to bear. So when you stop doing it, they notice and they hate it. They'll accuse you of being selfish, distant, heartless. They'll throw every tactic they know at you to drag you back into the drama. They will poke, prod, provoke. And the old version of you might have taken the bait. The old version of you might have sacrificed your peace just to smooth things over. But not anymore. Now you recognize the power in silence. You recognize the power in walking away from arguments designed to trap you. You recognize the power in not explaining yourself to someone who has no interest in understanding you. Your peace becomes more important than proving a point. Your calm becomes more important than winning a fight. You stop engaging with their chaos, not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to see that some battles are just traps wearing the mask of conversation. You stop answering late-night guilt texts. You stop feeling the need to rush to fix things when they pretend to fall apart without you. You stop internalizing their tantrums as evidence that you're doing something wrong. Instead, you sit with the discomfort. You let them be angry. You let them stew. You let them spiral. And you don't move You don't jump back into the fire just because they're screaming your name. You realize that their emotions are not emergencies you have to solve. You realize that every time you protect your peace, you're telling yourself, I matter too. Prioritizing your peace might mean cutting off contact. It might mean declining the invite. It might mean not responding to the email. It might mean saying no and not offering a single extra word to explain yourself. It might mean sitting with the fear of being misunderstood, disliked, or even hated, and choosing peace anyway. Because real freedom isn't about getting them to like you. Real freedom is about liking yourself enough to protect your soul from the toxicity you once thought you had to endure. When you make peace your priority, you stop running yourself ragged, trying to meet impossible expectations. You stop handing out your energy to people who only use it against you. You reclaim your time, your focus, your heart. And for the first time in a long time, you start living for yourself, not for their approval, not for their validation, not for their temporary acceptance, but for the beautiful, unbothered future you are building without them. There's a huge shift that happens when you finally stop explaining yourself to a narcissist. You realize it's not just a waste of energy, it's a setup. Every explanation you used to give was just another opening they would twist, attack, and use to control you. You could have the purest intentions, the clearest reasons, the most honest heart, and it still wouldn't be enough. Because to a narcissist, your explanations are not about understanding. They are ammunition. They pick them apart. They distort them, and they use them against you. So you stop giving them that access. You don't try to justify your choices anymore. You don't sit there pleading for them to see your side. You don't break yourself down into smaller and smaller pieces trying to make them comfortable with your boundaries. You don't ask for their permission to feel what you feel or to need what you need. Instead, you stand in your truth, quietly, confidently, without apology. You let your actions speak. You let your silence protect your peace. You understand that the only people who demand endless explanations for your boundaries are the ones who benefit from you not having any. It's a new kind of strength, and at first it feels unnatural. If you're a caring person, a communicator, someone who believes in fairness, your instinct is to explain, to make sure everything is clear and honest. But when you're dealing with a narcissist, clarity and honesty aren't what they want. They want confusion. They want you tangled up, doubting yourself, backtracking. And when you stop explaining, you deny them the chaos they crave. You deny them the opportunity to drag you back into their cycle of manipulation and control. You realize that a simple no is a complete sentence. I'm not available is a complete sentence. That doesn't work for me is a complete sentence. You don't owe them a backstory or a defense or an emotional breakdown to prove you're allowed to make decisions for your own life. You stop performing for their approval and you start living for your own peace. You protect your choices like you protect your energy fiercely, without guilt and without drama. There's a deep, liberating confidence that grows inside you when you stop explaining yourself. You start trusting your own judgment again. You start realizing that your worth was never dependent on convincing someone else to treat you with respect. You understand that true self-respect means giving yourself the freedom to choose without begging for validation. And the narcissist feels that shift. Oh, they feel it, and it terrifies them because they no longer have the power to pull your strings. You don't argue. You don't justify. You don't defend. You simply choose, you move, you live. And every time you do, you build a life that is free from